Have you ever wondered what the different types of tech consulting even are? Me neither, but it's super important to know the difference because each one leads to a different path with different returns and different levels of risk. In this video, I'm going to talk about those paths, then I'm going to use a logical scare tactic to reframe risk for you, and then finally give you a framework and a path to make risk seem less risky so that you can take the plunge into consulting with confidence. For those of you that are new here, my name's Mansell. I've been in tech consulting for the last 12 years for all the biggest names. I've lived on 3 continents and scaled multiple businesses to over 50K per month without ever needing permanent staff. So let's get in. So what I've tried to do in this, because every single state, region, country, whatever, have different terminology, I've tried to simplify them into statements that make logical sense as opposed to using the terminology that can differ across regions. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is perm consulting. And as the name implies, you're essentially a skilled expert, but you're working permanently for a consultancy who sells you to end clients for a day rate. Pretty much like an expensive rental car. So this is a pretty common model if you're working for people like Deloitte or PwC, people like that. But a lot of people don't know that there are actually way smaller consultancies called boutique consultancies. And that's generally with like 2 people up to around about 80, I would say. They're generally a lot smaller, but perm consulting is pretty much the exact same thing as being permanently employed. You just work for a different consultancy and they resell you to someone. So the pros of doing this is that they're going to handle everything from a sales and project placement. You literally don't have to do everything. Basically, they're pimping you out. And it's very good because for people who aren't good at sales or they aren't good at managing projects, you have an entire team to do this for you and you literally just go from A to B. Pro number 2 is that you get a salary regardless of whether you're on site or not. So again, people who are really afraid of going out on their own, this is a good place to start. It's also less risky for newbies because of a whole bunch of things that we're going to get into soon, one of which is the fact that you might not have a network or even know how to talk to clients. So you're going to get a holiday, your bonus, and any benefits that you get for working permanently for a company, regardless of whether you're on their bench or whether you're at a client's site. You also get free training, so someone else is going to pay for any of the mistakes that you make on site. You always have backup for someone to help you do the things that you don't know how to do, and it's a massive investment from the company on their part for someone who doesn't have the skills. So it's a great place to start, again, if you don't have the necessary skills to get the job done. But then most crucially on this is that you get to observe how client relationships actually work. So a lot of tech people don't really know how to talk to clients in a way of like building friends or speaking to them a way where they have to set expectations or just in a personal manner because they're so used to just dealing with machines. And that means that you can get bogged down in that and you can actually lose clients if you don't know how to talk to them. Pretty obvious. So this is a great way to get into that because generally when you go out to these sites through a perm consulting place, you might get paired with a senior, in which case you can piggyback off of all the stuff that they're doing to learn how to deal with clients and anything you might not know. So the cons of this are that they're going to keep a much larger slice of the pie. Now, obviously, because they're doing pretty much everything apart from you doing the delivery, they take far more of the money than you. So if you're starting out as a junior for a perm consultancy, you might get something like 40K, whereas they would be selling you for like $1,000 to $1,500 a day. So you can see the massive slice discrepancy that you have to deal with as a result of taking this path. They also tell you where to go and when to go there and what to do. So those of you who want true freedom and you don't like being told what to do, this isn't necessarily going to be the best thing for you to do. You're ultimately going to be capped on your income. So even if you are super senior working for a perm consultancy, they still need to make their margin on you. So you're still going to be capped. There is this ceiling that you're going to get to, which might be okay for some people, but if you want more money, it's not the way to go. And you're also building their client relationships. So you need to remember that when you're working for these perm consultancies, a lot of the time you're going to have a clause in your contract with them that says you can't just go and work for their clients directly. Now, legally, you could probably challenge this to some degree. They can't stop you from making an income, but it still creates a bunch of headaches and that might turn away any client that you do go and try work permanently for. So not the end of the world, but it is a huge thing and it's a very small environment when you're working in tech. Everyone tends to know everyone and ultimately you end up working in the same circles. So if you start off with a bad relationship, it kind of makes you untouchable. So keep that in mind. And the reality check behind this is that your paycheck is often the thing that you're sacrificing for comfort. So by having all of these added comforts, you're going to get less money and they're going to make more money on you for doing the exact same work. So keep that in mind. Then we get on to contract consulting. So it's the exact same thing as above, but you are on generally a contract with an end client and you do everything yourself through your own limited company, or if you're in the US, it's called an LLC. But essentially, it's the exact same thing. The pros of this are that you get to keep all the money. So you're going to be taking 2 to 3 times your perm salary. You get to choose what you do and when you do it, so you have more freedom. You're your own boss, which is great because, again, freedom. There are tax advantages that you can do because you're no longer a permanent employee. So if you have your own LTD or LLC with S-Corp status, there are lots of different things that you can do with tax that I'm not going to get into this video, but it's far more efficient than if you're a perm employee or if you're just going through yourself as a sole trader, which no one would do anyway, because of a whole bunch of other reasons. But you also have direct client relationships that you own, and relationships are everything in consulting. So there are cons to this too. Obviously, it's a lot of things to learn at first. You've got to do the accounting. If you're in the UK, there's something called IR35, business development, all of that stuff. For me, when I started, I had no idea how to do any of this shit. And it was a terrible experience because it was like 7 years ago and AI wasn't around to explain things simply. So even though we had Google, it really complicated things because I had to read a million articles. But now I understand accounting better than my actual accountant. And anything that I don't understand from a contractual perspective, I can just throw it into AI, make sure that it's accurate, and obviously do some fact checking. But at least I can get an understanding of what I need to do and when I need to do it. So this risk, it's still a con, but it's far decreased than what it used to be. You don't get paid sick leave or any holidays. So obviously that can turn a lot of people off, but when you factor in the amount of money that you're going to be making per day, per hour, or any of the methods that you choose, it far outweighs that. So if you're young and you hardly get sick like me, I'm very rarely sick. I don't know when last I got sick, but even when I did have a cold or something like that, I'll still go to work because in the back of my mind, it's a day rate. I'm rather going to get paid $1,200 to go and work with sniffles than to not do it. So for me, again, that con is mitigated because of that. But if you're someone who gets sick regularly or you have like a history of health concerns, maybe you want to factor this in as a real con for you. But saying that, there are things that can mitigate this as well. So there are tons of insurances out there that actually cover when you can't work as a contractor or if you get injured and things like that. So again, these are things you can research and mitigate. Any con can be turned into a pro with enough reframing. Then the next con is that you need to oversee lead generation, right? So you're going to be doing everything, accounting, you're running an entire business yourself. And apart from not understanding something, even when you do understand it, you still have to do it. You have to make sure that you meet these deadlines, that you go and meet these people, and you have to do the technical work. Obviously, you can hire a PA for some of this work to help you with that. And because you're earning such a big day rate, you can do that. But even now, a lot of it can be automated with AI. So again, I've automated so much of my stuff that I used to have to do manually. So again, this con is really mitigated. And then if you're in the UK, there's IR35. So it's basically just HMRC's bullshit way of labeling you, whether you're permanently employed or not, and you're actually secretly working as a disguised employee, in which case they're going to come and take a bunch of money from you. I talk about this in one of my other videos, but you can just get AI to tell you what it's all about, and it's a fine line between the reality and what HMRC deems a reality. Something to keep in mind is that, again, there is insurance with this. If you check out QDOS, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I used them for 5 years, and basically if you had to end up being told that you are inside IR35 and you owe the government a bunch of tax, they will help you with that and you're insured. So it actually becomes a no-con. But again, that didn't happen to me, and I don't know anyone that actually got called out on that. So the reality check behind this is that there's much more money to be made. Again, depending on your niche, your state, your country, all of that stuff, you need to factor it in when you're doing the pros and cons for each of these. But generally, it is a lot more money because you're doing everything. Then there's freelance consulting. So this is pretty much like contract consulting, but you're often going to do it through platforms like Upwork or Toptal, that sort of stuff. Specialized tech platforms that basically sell you to someone else. And the pros of this is that the platform is going to handle some of the lead gen for you. So you still have to create a profile and you're going to put a whole spiel on there about what you do and how you can help people. But the platform does give you a place to do this, and people are known to come to these platforms to actually do the thing. There's a lower barrier to entry for this. So you can start super junior, like if you've never done an engagement before, you can go and put a profile on there and really try and sell yourself. If you can make yourself come across as amazing, which obviously you should be doing if you're in consulting, it really can be a good point of entry. It's also good to test the waters without having to set up a company. So if you're just starting out and you're doing like 1 or 2 gigs, you can just do it as a sole trader straight through you. Again, I would always recommend setting up your own company and going that way. But if you're just starting out to see if this is for you, it can be a good way to get started. And you have global client access. So you do have this with the other methods as well. But again, for those who have nothing, no network or anything like that, this can be a great way to get a global market to come to you because people will find you on this platform. So the cons of this is that platforms are going to take a fee. They generally take 10 to 20% of the commission. I think Upwork takes 10%, but Point being is that they're going to take a slice of your pie. So if you end up making like 20K on a project, they're going to take 2 grand from you. Plus then you're going to pay tax on that. And if you're not set up as an LTD, they're going to take a ton of tax on that because you're a sole trader. So you need to factor that in, all the money behind this stuff, and add those into your pros and cons. There's generally lower rates than direct consulting. So if you're going direct to a client, you might get X amount of money, whether you're charging per hour or a day rate, whatever. But they're generally going to be lower than this, unless you're on the massively specialized tier on Upwork. But again, they're going to take a slice of the pie. And another problem with this is that you're competing for a race to the bottom on prices. So if we look at it from the perspective of AI, a lot of people are throwing themselves into AI consulting now and just building these workflows with automation for people. And one of the best ways to do that is to just throw yourself on Upwork immediately. You can do it after your first few days of learning how automation works. And the problem with that is it's getting insanely saturated. And with saturation, obviously it decreases value. So the people who are already set up, they're getting far more leads than the people who aren't, because most of the people who aren't don't really know how to sell themselves effectively, and they're just throwing a profile on there. But another problem that comes with this is that even people who have high profiles, if they're not smart enough to understand how to actually price themselves, they might just say, okay, cool, we'll do it $100 cheaper. And then someone else comes along and cool, we'll do it $50 cheaper. And it goes down and down until eventually someone chooses someone on price, as ultimately does happen with companies who don't understand that when you race to the bottom on price, you're also racing to the bottom on quality, because only people who don't provide great quality are going to rush down to the bottom. So you need to keep that in mind. It can be a bit more competitive when you're going this route, but I'm not suggesting you completely rule it out if you're just getting started and you have no network or no other path. Can be a great lucrative way to do it as long as you know how to sell yourself effectively. And then finally on this, it's less professional credibility than direct consulting. So again, when you have your own business, your own brand, and your name behind something, and you have this whole portfolio of clients, it's a completely different scenario than saying, hey, I've worked on Upwork. And even though you might have some client testimonials on Upwork, again, it is a different entity. Then you get to the new kid on the block, which isn't really so new, but a lot of people are using it for AI, and this is the fractional or retained consulting method. So it's definitely exploding in AI right now. I know it was around in graphic design and video editing and stuff like that. And basically how this works is that a company's going to pay a monthly retainer, somewhere between 5 to 25K, maybe less or more, depending on what you're doing, obviously. And they get specialized access to someone super senior for a certain amount of time a week. So it could be 3 days a week or X amount of hours a week, whatever. They're essentially paying for a fractional AI strategist, whatever you want to sell yourself as. And this is brilliant because it's predictable recurring revenue. So if you have clients and they love what you do, it means that every month you know you're going to get 10 grand from them until they cancel, in which case you would generally have like a 30-day clause. You need to give me a month's notice or whatever. So it's really predictable, and that's great for business, because if you have 5 of these clients and you're able to manage all their time, you know if you're selling 5 clients at 10K, you're going to get 50K a month, and you know that. And you can predict 30 days ahead when one of them is going to pull out, which means you can go and find another one. So that's why it's a really cool method. You also have higher perceived value than hourly work. So because you have this retained, specialized, fractional service that you can use all these buzzwords on, you really look like a specialized service that helps people, so that when they have you around, you can solve the thing instantly and provide instant value. So from your perspective, your perceived value is much higher. And one of the benefits for the company is that they're going to get someone who's super senior. So obviously if you're junior, this doesn't really work out, but the benefit to them is that they get someone super senior at a fraction of the cost that it would cost them without all of the hassle of having a permanent employee or any other contracts and things like that. And you can also serve multiple clients simultaneously. So like I said, you can have the 5 clients a month at 10K each if you can manage your time effectively, or if you have one person working alongside you. It's a really lucrative business to have. But obviously it has some cons to it, like most things in life. So there's no learning curve forgiveness. You need to know your shit from day one, because these people are paying you for a hyper-personalized service. If you aren't an expert in this thing, you're really not going to have that perceived value that you're giving off. There's not really the I'll figure it out phase like you have with traditional consulting, where you have a day rate or you're going to site, because those contracts generally run from 3 to 6 months and you generally have a project that you're working towards. It's completely different than someone having 5 hours of your time over 2 days where they're going to get on a call and expect immediate results and answers. It's a very different thing. So you need to know your shit. You're always on. So even outside your allocated hours, because you have this retained model and because it's your puppy, you're really going to want to look after this thing, especially if it's your first few engagements and you're trying to build your brand name in this specialized service. You're pretty much always going to be on. Like even when you're doing traditional consulting methods, for me, if I'm consulting for a client, one, I will never work overtime that is free. But if I have to solve a problem and I know that it's my fault that it hasn't been solved, then I'm going to work overtime for myself just so that I don't screw over my brand image or perceived value. So if you're doing that in the specialized method and you're juggling 5 different clients and you only have 3 hours left for the week to actually give them some value, you're going to be doing a lot of work by yourself at home out of hours for free. So just keep that in mind. But again, once you get into the swing of things, and if you have already been in this game for a little bit of time, you can mitigate a lot of these, and you can have a junior working alongside you who you pay a little slice of the pie to have these 5 clients on the retainer. So again, pros and cons, weigh them. And then we get on to one of my favorite methods, which is partnership/staff augmentation. And this is really cool because it's essentially the same thing as Perm Consulting, but you get paid a ton of more money and you don't have to do any of the lead gen or sales as you do with contract consulting. So it's somewhere in between. And the way that it works is that this boutique consultancy or this partner that you go to, they're going to resell you to an end client as one of them. So it's also called white labeling when you're speaking in those terms. But essentially, depending on what niche you're in, obviously, you get to keep almost your full slice of pie because they will sell you at a higher day rate because they're a business rather than you just going contracted to the end client. So a lot of the time you get to keep your money and you don't have to do any of the lead gen or sales or the brand recognition and stuff like that. And it's super valuable because they will just keep referring you. So you have this predictable revenue stream that just keeps going over and over again. So pro number 1, as I said, you get all the lead gen and sales done for you. You have a network of people that you can trust. So you're no longer just alone. You're not in the wild out there by yourself with no one to talk to. A lot of the time you can join the company's Slack or their Teams chat, and when you don't know technical things, you can speak to their people that work there. So you have a whole team to work with, which is super valuable. You have less of that I'm all alone thing. If there's something you don't understand, you have someone to help you. And like I said, you're going to make identical money to contract consulting. Sometimes you do have to take a very smaller slice of the pie, but I think when it comes down to it, it's totally worth it for what you get out of it. And then the cons, again, depending on your niche, it can impact your rate, but it also depends on how you negotiate that with them and the types of clients that they're working with. So if they're working with really exclusive clients that pay a lot of money to them, they'll generally give you your rate because they want to keep good people around to sell to these exclusive clients. And then you have the same cons as contract consulting, just minus the lead gen and sales. But you might be doing that in parallel because, again, you are still a contractor for these people. You're not permanently employed at all. You're just contracting for them and then they're reselling you as a contractor. Now, you might be asking yourself, which path should you take? And that's a really loaded question because there are so many things behind that. Like, what is your skill level? How big of a network do you have? Blah, 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 go on and on. So what I'll do is I'll just give you an example of the path that I took because the path I took was the one that I would recommend for most people who don't really have the skills or the network or any of those things first. So let's dive into it. I would start with Perm Consulting, which was the first thing that we spoke about. You're working permanently for a boutique consultancy. I would never, ever go and work for Deloitte or PwC or anything like that unless my goal was to get lost in the trees somewhere in the office. But I've always gone for smaller places. 1, because the opportunity slapped me in the face. But 2, when you work for a smaller company, you don't get lost. You're always seen so people can see how good you are at your job, which means you rise faster. You get more risk taken on you because they see who you are and how well you behave with clients and things like that. So I'm always going to go for the smaller one. But to start, I would go with Perm Consulting. And here are some of the reasons why. So you get to learn how consulting actually works on someone else's money. You're not paying for this by yourself. The risk is almost entirely outsourced. You're going there. These people are going to find you work. They're going to give you training and a whole bunch of other stuff. You learn how to speak to clients and engage with them, and you have people helping you do that. You also get to build your technical skills on someone else's money. So they're going to pay for all of your training if you're a junior. Now, you might be asking yourself, why the hell would someone take on a junior with no skills and things like that? And it's because of this model where they make a ton of money on juniors to resell them to people alongside a senior. And it's a really common thing where you might have like 2 or 3 juniors and you have 1 senior overseeing the project. And what some companies are doing to take this even further is that they will bring in these people for a year, send them to a client side, train them up completely on behalf of the client, and then they sell them to the client as a fully trained person who knows their environment and the skills and all of that stuff. So a bit of a sidetrack there, but that's just one of the reasons why people invest all of this time and money into juniors. Then the third thing is that you also get to see the different client dynamics without the pressure of ownership. So if you are junior and you don't know all of the different things like managing client expectations and how all of the things work around managing clients, this is a great way to do it because you're going to have a bunch of people showing you the ropes as you go ahead. You get to learn what the engagement managers are doing when they speak to clients. You get to understand what the technical people are doing when they go to clients, how to talk to clients, all while being paid and shadowing someone else. You also get to create a network while you're being paid. So for those of you who have zero network, this is a no-brainer to start. If you don't want to take the Upwork route and have all of these other benefits, it's a great place to start because you're going to have this network built for you. You go to your first client, they know who you are, you do an amazing job there, you make friends while you're on site there, and slowly branches out your network bigger and bigger, so that when you do finally go independent, you have all of these people that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm going on my own now, blah, blah, blah. Is there anything available? I've done that tons of times. Again, you need to check your contract to make sure that you don't have some clause in there that says that you can't do this immediately, but a lot of the time you can negotiate this with your employer, or there are ways around it with different varying degrees of networking. So then finally, on the pros of doing this for beginners is that you actually understand what value is to the client. And that's the most important thing, because a lot of people sell their skills when really the client just wants transformation. And you don't learn about the specifics of what clients want by not actually doing the work. You're not just some AWS dude, you're someone who provides less downtime, far more automation, whatever it is they need. That's the stuff that you're actually selling. And you're not going to learn a lot of those things until you've actually been out there in the field. Because all of that shit that you learn in a textbook, cool, you've got the knowledge, it makes you far less scared to go out and do it. But really, consulting is about client dynamics and delivering value. Those are the most important things. And there's a much larger difference between knowing something and actually implementing what you know. So you get to do that in a way where someone else is paying for you and helping you do it. So that's why, for me, it's an amazing place to start. And then we talk about the progression that works. So this is the progression that I took, and it's completely arbitrary. So you don't have to take it as your thing. It's just what I did. And if I look back on it now, I would never have done it differently based on my situation. So for people who are where I was 14 years ago, where I didn't have the skills and I didn't have the network, again, this is a great place to start. But if you have the skills and you have the network and you have all of that stuff, you might as well just go contract consulting or do the staff org/partnerships, which is what I'm doing now. So what I did is I tend to work 2 years at every company, not because I have this cutoff date. That's just, if I look back on my resume over 15 years of my entire work life, it's always been 2 years. It just happened to work like that. But for Perm Consulting, I did 2 years, maybe it was 2.5 if we include the 6 months training. And I did that to learn the game, build the skills, build the network, make connections, whatever. And then I went contract consulting, so I did it after 2 years. And once you do this for a few years, so again, arbitrary numbers, 2 to 5 years, once you've maximized your earning potential, you've got tons of client relationships, then you can start looking at things like this fractional model, or you sell other people's time by opening up a proper consultancy and just, you have your own boutique consultancy now. Or you can do what I do, where I've gone down the partnership thing, so I'm still contract consulting, but now I've got tons of partners that I work with. So they help me do lead gen for some of the specific tech that I'm working with. But then they'll also refer me to other partners. So if I do a tech, say I'm doing AI now, and the one company that I've been partnered with for so long for something else, they're not doing AI at the moment. They're happy to refer me for any AI projects because A, they know I'm really good at my job. B, they might get something out of that for presenting me to these people. There are tons of reasons why they're going to do this thing. So you can see why this progression works, because if you have nothing, this is the fastest way to actually get you to something. And you shouldn't be looking at this over like a 1 or 2 year period, again, unless you've got the skills and the network already. You need to be looking at the long game here. I did this over 12 years. Now, I could have done it sooner if I had someone to help me understand all of this shit, and if I took on a lot more risk at different times. But again, during these places, there were different hops that I did take where I did increase the amount of money that I made and other things that I experimented with. So this 10-year timeline, it can be decreased to like an 8-year timeline. And if you want to hear the exact story of how I did all of this stuff, you can check the other video in the description below of where I explain my story step by step from start to finish and how I got into all of this stuff. But you can see why this progression works, because it takes you from the foundations all the way up to something that can make you a ton of money and decouple you from the company ultimately. And now we get on to my favorite part, which is the reframe of risk, because a lot of people, before they make the jump, me included, I was so fucking afraid of this, but I kept saying to myself, I have job security and stability, everything's going great. Even as Perm Consulting, you tell this to yourself, I'm making good money, 100K is good money, blah, 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 I have stability. But I'm not telling you to just completely quit without anything and quit your permanent job, whatever it is that you're doing. I'm suggesting that you start small. And it's okay to start small, because a lot of people think they just need to go big, but really you don't. But what I really want to do is bring home the point that job security is an illusion. If you look at how many layoffs there have been over the last 2 years and how many more there's going to be as we evolve as a species, your job security becomes less and less true. The goal isn't just to make money here. You're not just going out to cash in on some AI gold rush, which is what a lot of people are doing now. You need to think about building a consulting practice or something sustainable that's going to make you money over a long period of time, because you're going to be doing this potentially for the rest of your life and hopefully at some point decoupling your own personal time from it. So one thing that I like to do when I'm thinking about risk and my job stability and all that stuff is I look at it on this long time frame. So as morbid as it may sound, this is something that I use a lot when I'm trying to factor in risk and stuff like that. But on a long enough timeline, you're either going to live long enough to watch everyone you know and love die, or you yourself are going to suffer. So the fact that these things might happen, it should motivate you to do the stuff that is risky. Because when you embrace this stuff and you know that it's a certainty that one of these two things are going to happen on a long enough timeline, is it really that scary to do something like this, to go and talk to someone on your own in your own company about solving their technical problems, which you can already do just for far less money? Because you have this thing in your head that it's super scary. You should always do the best you can to live the life you really want, because risk only needs to be understood, not feared. So let's move on to understanding some facts, and then we can find a framework to help us combat this type of stuff. So in 2024 alone, there were 238,000 tech workers who lost their jobs across over 1,000 companies. That's 653 people a day losing their job, those secure positions. And in 2025, it's already at 83,000. So stability is really just another word for certainty. And the only certainty in life is that ultimately everything is going to lead to uncertainty at some point. Competition is at an all-time high, and it's only going to get higher the more that AI evolves. So the chances of you losing your job to someone who can leverage that better than you, or to a system that can replace some of the repetitive work that you do, it becomes higher and higher every single day that you don't grow as a person. So the only way to really have job security is to be the best at what you do. And if you're already the best at what you do, and everything ultimately leads to uncertainty anyway, why not just take the leap and build something for yourself that has lasting value and a little bit of risk? Because as we just discussed, none of this is really that risky when you frame it that way. You're going to die. People you know are going to die before you potentially. You're going to suffer. You cannot not have stress in your life unless you change your perceptions about the things that make you stressful. And that's what we do with education, knowledge, and practice. And you're never going to have those things unless you finally take that leap into doing something that scares you. And that's the thing that you know you should do. Because the world's heading to a place where mediocrity is just not going to be accepted anymore. By nature of having AI augment our own intelligence, mediocrity is going to go away on a long enough timeline. But that provides a ton of opportunity for you and what you do, because if you use AI to leverage what you do and automate some of the things that are historically scary or things that you would have to do that would make the job more stressful, you can get rid of those things to make them a lot easier to do. So here's the framework I use whenever I take something nowadays for a big jump, because before I just used to throw myself into the shit and just deal with whatever the consequences were. And it was really stressful, but it got the job done. And really, I think it's just how I learn. I prefer to do it that way. But on the back of that, as I got older and I had family and a whole bunch of other things, I thought I need to put something behind it to actually understand what I had historically done to make it easier when I try new things. And the first thing that I like to do is educate myself. So education is free everywhere mostly nowadays. Plus you have AI to talk about anything that you don't understand in a way that no one else can ever explain it to you. So it's super important to find the things that you're afraid of, find out why you're afraid of them, and then figure out systems to make them work for you. And again, so many resources on this. But the important thing to remember here is to not get stuck. And for me, I'm a perfectionist and I really struggle with this because I want to have the perfect answers before I go and try something super, super scary, which again only happened later on in my life. But I tend to get stuck when I'm doing new things, and that stuck seems like you're progressing, but it's actually a form of procrastination to stop you doing the thing you know you should be doing because you want to have 100% certainty that this thing isn't going to fail. But there's always going to be some level of failure involved or some level of learning on the fly because that's just the nature of life. So being adaptable, again, super important skill. But my point being on the education, research a ton, make sure you know the knowledge that you need, but don't get stuck here. Step 2 is you start with limited liability. If you're working perm right now and you don't know which method to take, but you want to dabble in something, don't quit your job and start a consultancy. First dabble. You can do it as a side project. You can moonlight. There are tons of ways to do that. You can even skill up while you're permanently employed to a point where you have the skills and then you're comfortable to go out and do consulting. You could learn about how business works before you go and start contract consulting so that lead gen and sales are less scary for you. You could go and find partnerships before you quit to work as a contractor for these partners before you quit. That's something that I did. Again, check out my journey for a ton of tips. Basically, the point I'm making here is that you learn the skills before you quit if you're afraid to just quit. Step 3, you expand your comfort zone daily. So it could be something super simple, like just writing your first line, changing your LinkedIn bio, doing something that makes you different to where you were the day before. And then as you expand, your comfort zone is going to expand. So the more risk you ultimately take on, the more of the entire world becomes your comfort zone. And that's why it's important to always leave your comfort zone, because right now your comfort zone might be this, but the more steps that you take, by the end of it, you're going to have this whole world as your playground. Like, I've lived on 3 continents and I really have very little fears anymore about travel and things like that, speaking to different cultures, selling in different cultures, because I've been to so many different countries over the years that really I just feel like I can do anything anyway. And that brings us on to step 4, which is learning from the expansion. Every single time you do this thing that scares you, you no longer just have this confidence that you can do it. You have literal evidence that you've done the thing that once upon a time scared you. You did it with far less resources and you still made it work. And that's how you learn from the expansion. You grow and you become better at this thing. So you can see why this framework is so effective, because you start with the small baby steps, you chunk down this massive scary process and you turn it into something that actually helps you learn and become a stronger person with evidence. And then step 5 is you can go out there and you can just grow immediately because you have this framework behind you. You know exactly what to do when something scary comes up. You can adapt to it, you can change to it, and you can become better at whatever it is that you're doing almost instantly. The fear is still going to be there. It never, ever, ever goes away. It just lingers. And you can push it away because now you have this system, you have this evidence, you have this proof that you are who you say you are, and that's far more important than faking it till you make it. Which I will say is a really good thing to do. You should definitely fake it till you make it, because that helps you build this evidence. But the point is, after you've done this a few times and you implement this system that I'm giving you here, there's literally nothing that you can't do, because you're going to have this whole system to get you where you want to go. So in closing, the way that I would frame this is I'd say the only time that risk doesn't pay off is when it's not taken. Because if you're not growing, you're falling behind. And that's a much larger risk than pushing yourself forward and doing the thing that scares you. And if you have a framework that helps you get through those scary things, then it makes them less risky. It makes them less scary. And if you know where everything ends up ultimately, and you factor those two things together, logically the only thing to do is to move forward in life. Because otherwise, you're not going to have a lot of fun. And another way to frame it is that by having all of these tools, there really is no downside to risk. Because within growing, you're lowering your risk and you're increasing your comfort. So frame it that way, and that's another way to look at it. And there are tons of other resources online to deal with any of your fears. There's tons of AIs that can help with that. Again, I've got all of that stuff in another video, which you can check out in the description below. But if you'd like any more stuff covered, just leave a comment below and I'll always try and make a video to help people on whatever they can get through in consulting. Otherwise, you can check out my community where I'm helping people create 6-figure consulting careers every single day. The link's also in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video.